Welcome to our series of tutorials on how to calculate Apple's equity value and enterprise value. In addition to those, we're also going to be taking a look at valuation metrics and multiples and using those to guide our discussion toward actually valuing Apple in the series of videos coming up after this. Now, to begin with, the reason why this part of the course exists in the first place is because previously we went through some detail on accounting and we saw how to project Apple's three financial statements, how to tie them together, and even how to fix problems such as a balance sheet not balancing when we have these three financial statements, the income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow statement. And that's fine, and we went into accounting in a fair amount of depth there, but what we need to do now is bridge the gap between accounting and valuation. Because when we go and value a company, we do need to have their three financial statements here, but what's missing from this picture is how much the company is actually worth. Remember that the whole point of a valuation, valuing anything, whether it's a house or a company or a car, is to figure out what it's worth. And the problem with our current model here is that we have no indication of that. We know what their revenue is, we know what their operating income is, we know what their net income is, but we have no indication of what the company as a whole, Apple as a whole, is actually worth. And so that's why we need to go in and do this discussion on how to actually value them based on what their share price is, based on their filings, based on some other information that we'll be looking at in this tutorial. And you see that up here at the top, I've changed around the model a bit to support this because now we have this assumptions and valuation overview here at the top. I have some additional information. I have a couple extra rows here at the bottom, and we'll be getting into those later on in this course. But you see that I've changed around the model slightly. Much of it is still the same. I've added a few line items here at the bottom of the income statement, which we'll get into later. And other than that, the balance sheet and cash flow statement are pretty much the same. So the model here has been modified a bit, but again, if you've already been through all the accounting course and all that material, then you should be fine jumping right into this. So the first and most basic concept we need to go into here is equity value for a company. And this one is pretty simple. Just go over here on the side. Equity value, also known as market cap or market capitalization, is just equal to a company's shares outstanding times the share price. Now, what does this actually mean? Well, as an example, I have open Google Finance right here. And to show you a real world example here, we see right here market cap, 198.54 billion for Apple. So when you go to a site like Google Finance or Yahoo Finance in the real world, the market cap tells you how much the company as a whole is worth. Now it's not exact, it's not precise, which is why we need to look at some of these other metrics and calculations, but at first glance, the market cap tells you how much a company is actually worth. And you see Apple's share count listed right here, and then you see their share price listed right here. And so that's how you actually get to this market cap number. Each of these shares represents an ownership stake in Apple. So you see that they have 906.79 million. That means that you own 1/906 millionth of Apple. A very small number, but large companies have a huge number of shareholders. So that's the most basic concept here. And you probably are familiar with market cap because you've probably seen it in the news before, you've probably seen it on financial sites and other sources like this, but I just wanted to go over that and show you a real world example of where it appears and how it's actually calculated. Now, the part I think that's more interesting here than just the definition, which you probably already know, is how you actually get this information from Apple's filings, which is what I'm going to go into right now. I'm going to go to their 10K, there's a link to it right below this video. And the place that you usually find Apple's share count is toward the top of the 10K. Normally they have an indication of their shares outstanding right here. And sure enough, we see 900,678,473 shares of common stock issued and outstanding as of October 16th, 2009. So whenever we're analyzing a company, we generally like to pull the shares outstanding number from the very top of the annual or quarterly report that we're looking at. So now to actually enter this number onto our model right here, I'm going to go over to basic shares outstanding, and I'm going to enter 900,678.473. Now the reason I'm entering it like this is to keep our style consistent. Remember that share counts here are in thousands, so similar to what we saw on our income statement for diluted shares outstanding, we want to make sure that shares here are formatted in the same way. So that gives us our basic shares outstanding number. Now the next step here is just to take Apple's share price. Now you see the valuation date here is January 29th, 2010. So what I'm going to do is within Google Finance, I'm going to go to historical prices and just scroll down to get to January 29th, 2010. We see the closing price here was 192.06. So I'll go to share price and enter 192.06. Now in investment banking, you would actually pull the share price either from Capital IQ or maybe Bloomberg or another source. I'm showing you how to get it by using freely available sources like Google and Yahoo Finance, because if you're following along, you probably do not have access to Capital IQ or other sources like that. So I'm just showing you how to do it the way that anyone can by using these public sources. So the share price and shares outstanding, what we have to do now is calculate the equity value. Now you have to be careful here. Before I told you that the formula was just share price times shares outstanding, but we have to be careful here because remember that shares outstanding here are in thousands already. So what we have to do here is take our shares outstanding, divide by 1,000, because remember our dollar amounts here are in millions, our shares outstanding are in thousands. If we divide by 1,000, then that puts shares outstanding into millions instead. So we're going to divide by 1,000 here and then multiply by the share price. And that gets us to our basic equity value of 172 billion, close to 173 billion right here. So that's how we go through and calculate the equity value or market capitalization for a company like Apple. To summarize, we find the shares outstanding in their filing, usually at the top of the 10K or 10Q quarterly filing. We find the share price off of Capital IQ or Google Finance or Bloomberg or another source like that. And then we just multiply the share price times shares outstanding to get to basic equity value. Depending on how we've set it up, we may have to multiply or divide by different units here, but that is the basic idea for how we get to our equity value for a company like Apple. Coming up next, we're going to be taking a look at how this definition of value and market cap and equity value, how all those definitions get more complex because we have other securities beyond just the basic common shares outstanding. We have other securities that are going to make this calculation more complex. So we'll be getting into those and taking a look at how and why we use them and then how to make calculations involving those securities.